Swaminathan, who else, etc. And look at a single painting in some detail, and for a while you will be watching this painting by K.G. Subramanyan called Malva Nights for about 45 minutes. So that itself is rather unusual, because normally nobody would be looking at a painting for 45 minutes. So one of the advantages of having a talk like this is that you do concentrate on a painting. This evening, Rajiv Lochan is a professor. Rajiv Lochan is a kind of an insider. All our speakers so far were people who love art and who write about art, speak about art, but who are not insiders exactly in the sense in which Rajiv Lochan is. He is a painter, to start with. Art, he did not rest at that, so he moved on to become the director of the National Gallery of Modern Art, where at the moment he is located. He has studied in the celebrated arts faculty of MS University, Baroda, and has been teaching in Delhi University, in Jamia Millia, has been to Japan. That's how he got his wife, who I hope would join us.
Should be arriving.
Should be arriving. She herself is an eminent painter. So there you are, Professor Rajiv Lochan and K.G. Subramanyan through his painting Malva Nights. Rajiv. And now I'm going to sit there.
Thank you. Meant to do. Oh, well. Thanks to Copal and Eaglewise for giving me this opportunity to be able to spend and dwell upon something and a personality that is equally dear to my heart and perhaps has equally contributed to whatever little I could achieve in life. He's been my own mentor. And let me share with you that I've had this privilege of being, seeing, hearing, and experiencing this man and this man's persona for over 35 years. A very personalized and intimate relationship, and has equally seen a genre of this nature evolve in its own context. I want to share with you that when Ashokji said 45 minutes, I thought, okay, let me start. I don't know where I'm going to end. Wherever you would like me to end, wherever you begin to yawn is where I shall stop. Nevertheless, I also want to share that it took me about 15 days and about a couple of telephone calls to Ashokji to choose whom I would really love to speak to, and why and how. And after a great deal of thinking, I did come to this painting, which actually is in the collection of the National Gallery of Modern Art, painting that I love and really admire. Also to share with you that the first retrospective of K.G. Subramanyan was also organized at the National Gallery of Modern Art during my tenure. Something that I feel very personally, gratified that it had to time itself in that fashion. Well, I'm reminded of a quote from Salvador Dali, the last century's greatest showman, who did, whenever he did talked very sensitive things. I quote, "Art is what flows from the mind, through the hands, through the tip of the brush, onto the canvas." Actually, doesn't stop there. He goes on to say, "And love is the same thing," unquote. I actually see that truly happening in the totality of this man and his work. And therefore, I'm equally interested, besides talking about the work itself, that's what your actual intention is trying to enumerate what is it that makes this man to make a work of this nature. And I think that's what I attempt to do. In 1984, I used to have the opportunity to consistently write for the Link magazine those years, and that would give a great deal of space. And KG had a major exhibition at Art Heritage, and I wrote a piece, almost 2.5 pages, something that when one doesn't get an opportunity anymore in the newspapers, calling him the Renaissance man. Why the Renaissance man? Because he truly endeavored to bring about a new set of values, assimilating them, yet inventing them and reinventing them. And this painting, to my mind, is also a result of that experimentation. I'm also fortunate to have seen and observed very keenly the process that KG himself has indulged in arriving at this, because this is a work, Malva Nights as it is called, of 1998. My association with KG ended in the year 1979, and those were the years when he had started the glass paintings, small in nature, reverse painting process, combining, experimenting. Actually, you have to, in a reverse painting process, you have to paint from the back and you have to pre-imagine what the end is going to be like. A very tedious process, and inspired by the Tanjore paintings and that entire genre. To tell you the truth, the title Malva Nights has nothing to do about Malva and nothing to do about nights, the glory of the musical nights that we might imagine. It's actually a metaphoric title that truly encapsulates the entirety of Subramanyan's preoccupations, concerns, and engagements. And perhaps one work that I consider to be truly at its peak. Let me go back and dwell a little with the whole notion of why this man is engaged in several diverse kind of activities that help him to create a work of this nature. The works of Subramanyan create a mosaic that links even the most isolated moments and those isolated experiential moments of everyday experience. Assimilating the idols of the time, understanding the tradition equally dear to him, but with a sense of revalidating the tradition and formulating an individualized and personalized approach in an extremely wide perspective, well, be it with painting, writing on art, murals, printmaking, toy, weaving, or even designing books for children. So here is a man whose work, the end result, which turns out to be a painting, is actually engaged in several diverse kind of activities which contribute to one another with a sense of an anatomy of interdependence, rather than being individualistic, which they are in their own context, yet binding it into a whole. A pedagogue, his approach to art has been to instill in his pupils the basic meaning of art in its totality, a concept he himself truly believes in. Let me share some personal experiences that you might never get an opportunity otherwise. I came from a family of artists. I'd seen enough. When I went, the first statement he made to me was, Rajiv, you need to undo all what you have learned. Perhaps I didn't understand what he meant to say. Something that I probably even don't understand now, but then I can have a clearer clarity of picture. So the process of undoing, which he contributed to, and the process of doing as much, to be able to open my own inner eyes rather than being dependent on something that is referential to a particular context that I had grown with, is something that he had also gone through. And I've had very interesting discussions, encounters with him to deal with this issue. I'm also reminded of this quote from Marcel Proust that I truly love, and I find it absolutely applicable to this man. We'll come to the work later. The quote is, "The universe is true and dissimilar to each one of us. It is not one universe, but millions of universes, almost as many of them as there are eyes and minds that awaken every morning." Unquote. The task of an artist and the creatively inclined should be to portray this universe and provide an image to it, because our observations are not mere passive records. This is something that I had written about him in the year 1984, which I see that how this complexity of several diverse elements and the assimilation of them juxtaposes itself to form a whole and a totality rather than a singular context is what actually the real and true power of KG is. I think we all would relate to the idea that money is not trying to seek a personal style, but actually a personal language. In spite of the fact that he uses the verbal language as much, in as much a prolific fashion that he does, that anything he tries to choose, he uses it utilizing a language that he has created out of a totality of understanding of several diverse elements. His work suggests many insightful links with the European context of modernism. I've also observed his period was tremendously inspired by the Western masters, including Matisse. I've also experienced that period where he was tremendously inspired by the weavers, having worked in the Weavers Service Center with Copal Jacker, a lot of conversations. Also, he's recalled several experiences of his social work that he initially started with when he was young at Baroda. But to the art historical answers of Western modernism, Subramanyan has also added an awareness of the varied legacies of the Indian tradition. But not tradition, when I use the word tradition, it's not tradition, so to say. And the complexities of the Indian present. So it's like it's further enriched it through the understanding of other performing arts, a point that we must not forget. Because he talks extensively about the real meaning of gesture, that you can actually see, the gesture, the vitality of the gesture and its potent quality that you would be able to observe in the work. There is no dilemma in his art, but an enduring resonance of the past, its many effects on the legacies we carry into the future. For philosophers and artists, the 20th century marks exhilarating times of which a passion for destruction and a desire for immortality are insoluble components. To be caught between the worlds is according to this art predicament. In Subramanyan's works, this culminates in the starkly macabre and majestically sensual figures of the terracotta reliefs that perhaps unintentionally articulate the enlarging differences between society and sociability, desire and perception. The sensuality that we can see and experience in KG's work is a similar kind of sensuality that Ramachandran also attempted and has worked with his Yayati series. But he used Yayati to lean upon and tell a contemporary tale through that. But KG relied on his everyday experience of what he observed around himself, which gets portrayed with his critical ability to analyze every moment of an experience that he saw around. His smirky smile when he would walk, noticing everything, yet not making you aware that he has noticed. And subtly, it would appear in a work. Almost like someone who's silently and critically going into your psyche and enjoying the sensuality that you're actually trying to see. That's the point that I wanted to make. And this is something that I have observed for years. You know, it is entire personality. This attached yet detached kind of a thing, you know, that he can actually see the essence and from any kind of environment that is provided to him, and necessarily need be a portrayal of that instance, so to say, but juxtaposes itself with several kind of diverse elements the way they coexist in our times. Concerned and conscious of the gap between urban art and the social context, he always strives to find a new via media to commune with the people and his environment, and silently. His murals, books for children, and his toys, among with his comments on art, always aim to penetrate the sensibilities of the masses with a wider and new dimension. He's continued to write. In fact, each time we meet, he's always telling you that, you know, I'm thinking of something like this. I often like to mimic him. Tell you a very interesting. I was a young first year student to bring out a small magazine called Expression. It was essentially based on asking him a question every Saturday and listening to him for 2 hours. I remember my first question, the first issue was on what is actually abstraction. And he went on and talked about it for 2 hours. And this grew up, and then it came to Bhupen was young, he had started painting, and, you know, all those kind of things. This notion of the naive was something that was actually haunting us, concerning us, and all those kind of things. So probably the second or the third lecture, I raised this question. I mean, we understand this word naive, but can't actually relate to it. Something like that. He went on, explained it to us, and I can't forget the last statement that he said. He paused and said, Ajib, naivety is so fresh, it's almost like virginity. If it goes, it goes. Something that has got stuck in my mind, that how something that was a notion that was considered to be in those years, I'm talking about actually 1973, 74. I completely recall and vividly recall Bhupen's painting. I'm trying to make these comparisons of the time where this entirety has evolved. Bhupen was when I joined, Bhupen was a student of art criticism and had begun painting those years. And his first painting, the Hammam, that is what we saw. And this was a great, what should I say, a reason for dialogue amongst us. Okay, miniature tradition, how this notion, blah, 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 blah. I think most of these dialogues that we have had with KG, which have given us insights into some of those realms of this man, that probably even it would be difficult to articulate and write. Well, he has very interesting views, and he's written extensively, as I said. I quote, "No content that does not become a vocal visual language is negotiable in visual art. And in the final count, it is where the visual language takes one beyond the content, irrespective of what it is." I think this was exactly. I also recall a very interesting story that he shared with me, something that I've tried to share in my own words in several diverse ways wherever I go. This is about what is it that works a work of art, that makes a work of art pulsate, vibrate within the context of what I just described. And he cited this example. He's actually shared a Zen story with us. So vivid and etched in my mind. He said, here was this young British academic painter who wanted to learn Oriental art. So he went to this great master, showed him his work. The master looked at the work and did not respond. He was obviously agitated, the young British painter. Master, doesn't it look like it? Doesn't it appear like that? You don't seem to respond. The master was silent. No dialogue. Master, tell me, where do I start? I've come all the way to experience something that it's almost like saying, I also joke to myself and say, oh, enamored by the Orient. Physical causality of fact and its effect, enamored by an experiential concept. That was the kind of. So the master, in his very philosophical note, said, go out, experience nature, and paint the first living thing that you see, and then come back to me. This is what I thought. What is it? Paint living things every day? See living things every day? What is it so different about this whole thing? He went out, these old times, saw a sow, a female pig, just sleeping outside the master's house. He sat down, made an academic, realistic study of the sow sleeping in the environment, and rushed back to the master and said, Master, you said first living thing. It was the sow. I painted the sow. That's it, isn't it? What you asked me to do. This time the master laughed. So he didn't understand anything. He said, why, master? I asked you to paint the first living thing that you see. Fine. It was the sow. She was sleeping. She was breathing. Where is the breath? Where is the quality of breath? Your sow is dead. I think this got so very clear with this Zen story that he shared with me, and that perhaps he is equally trying to do. Everyone wants every work of his to kind of vibrate, pulsate with his totality of experience, not limiting itself to the tradition and the past that he has experienced, and relating it to the present that he sees and feels every day. Well, talking about language art, can I have some water, please?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Because I've culled out several important things from several diverse sources to kind of support the argument that to be able to experience. Although I firmly believe that a work of art doesn't need to be truly understood, it needs to be experienced. And therefore, my attempt is essentially to create the environment in which the experiential aspect of this work may enhance and get more relatable. In 1961, he wrote, as an artist, he would like to have something elaborate, like a language. He also argued that it is a fragmented society, as all modern societies are, something that grows out of a collective social experience like language in an unutterable dream. Only a dwelling up of sensibilities from a specific environment, he added, can make a work of art irresistible in a time like ours. I again quote, art is in-depth communication, and as such is more in the nature of a dialect than a working Esperanto. It's the nature of a dialect. I mean, it doesn't need to be, it needs to have its own nuances, it needs to have its own subtleties. It needs to have its own spontaneity, it needs to have its own rhythm. And that actually should come from inside, the way this entirety is digested and brought about. Genuine freedom comes from it when the unity in an artist's oeuvre is psychic and not stylistic. Very clear and very strong positive observation. And when he realizes that there's something you can do with clay, that you can do, there's something that you can only do with clay that you can't do with paint. To be able to distinguish that and to be able to see how and what works. And that's probably the reason why he experimented and did so many diverse kind of things. I've observed him doing some of those murals, the sand casting murals, smoking away, talking to her, and he's going and, it's like almost discovering for himself new avenues, new pastures, new ways to create something that syncs with that inner rhythm of both the surface quality as well as the vitality of the image. A sense of history is part of civilization, and that past can serve as a background or give an added height, but its communicational structures or language are no more serviceable, as all languages or communicational structures can for constant reveal and renewal starts when the consumption of pristine contacts with things around it. Again, another one. I think art is language at this point of renewal. It is language in the crucible. So you can see why it is sustained more by actual contacts than by its antecedents. And the larger these contacts are, the better it is for it. So it has to have that great relationship and that great understanding of the rhythm. I'm sure you begin to relate to why certain kinds of things, and mind you, I mean, I think I described to you that this is a painting on an acrylic sheet, a reverse painting process, which uses both watercolor and oil. So it's an entirely a reversal of what conventionally artists are meant to do, to start from a blank canvas and arrive at the image. Here is an image that is preconceived in its form, and you work out the whole process in the reverse. That the flat colors are the ones that are closest, are painted first, and then you go back into it, and then it's sealed from the back. Again, another quote. If we line up the world's traditions one after another, we can see how they cover different areas of human sensibility by accident or by design. Taken together, they can be considered different sectors of a total art language. He believed that pluralism is written and into the art language, and visual signs as simultaneously conventional and sensuous, and unlike verbal language, in most cases analogous to experiential specificities. This word analogous is actually very dear to him. I recall some of those. One day he got up and said, "Is this time?" So we all were kind of quiet. What does it denote or connote? Or is it analogous of time? Yeah, it's actually analogous of. Do you know the meaning of analogous? Yes. Equivalent to. Yeah. But is it time itself? Actually, we all thought this was time. In a way, being young people, they said, can you catch time? Can you hold time? Or can you only experience time? You can only experience time. So this analogous experience that he carries is what he's actually trying to translate into his work. I also recall another experience. Jyoti Bhatt, my other teacher, had given us, this was the third year, fourth year, he gave us an exercise, go and paint rain. So we were all went berserk, and sharp like this, taking camera, this, umbrellas, this, that, my friend who had a motorbike, the only one who had a motorbike, in the mud, taking the motorbike and taking images and taking records of them and all that. So he came and he has this smirky smile. He said, "Kya kar rahe aap?" We've been asked to paint rain. भीगे हो छतरी लेके रेन एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे हो जाओ थोड़ा करेले बाग तक थोड़ा घूम के जरा बारिश को एक्सपीरियंस करके आओ फिर ये सब नौटंकी करना I think we were all in the dumps. Probably, totally dejected. The more one recalls these stories, the more they get clearer. So I think the whole purpose of life itself, that we all, in our own fashion, is an experiential one. And this is exactly what this man is trying to do, silently on one side and portray on the other. And the sense of layered. Through his work in the last 30 years, Subramanyan brought a comparable post-realist, post-academic, eclectic and post-spontaneous expression into this language and this realm of art. Very important aspect that he talks about, I think I referred to it when I was talking, this word gesture came. The relevance of gesture. Gestures invariably are attributed to, you can see his work, his line, so gestural. It has a sense of flaw. Spontaneity probably is also not appropriate in that sense of the term. Talking about gesture. In a radio talk given in the year 1966, he draws attention to the use of gestures in traditional Indian art. It's all there. He said, broadly speaking, all communication involves gesture. Often, I remember and recall first time I heard Bhimsen Joshi at Maharaja Sayajirau's palace. And Bhimsen Joshi is actually kind of pulling and playing with the sword, or Mallikarjunji, or else Kumaranandaji always play. Where does this gesture evolve? It's kind of in sync with the inner vitality and gesture in so many diverse kind of elements, and how that could be, the potency of that could be utilized in a work. Broadly speaking, all communication involves gesture. It is through signs that communication is effected. Gestures are no more than evocative or expressive signs. That's where truly one understood the quality of line, the way line transforms. Actually, I would like to share with you. Being at Baroda and having studied there, this was not extremely excited with the way art history was taught. And so when I got this opportunity at Jamia to draft the whole syllabus, what I understood there helped me, because I started with something absolutely different, that in the sense that started with transformation of nature into principles of art, experiential. Concept of line, the way the concept of line has evolved from prehistoric times until contemporary times in major chunks. Concept of form, concept of color, concept of volume and depth. And actually, I'm telling you, by the first year, my student was able to recognize, not only recognize, understand the really innate quality of what that really line was able to achieve in a much larger context. Something that I owe personally to an experience of this kind. You can see. Subramanyan, with whom the image is gesture, is also very using conventional gestures, because otherwise they would get related to or get contextualized in a certain conditioned fashion. conventional gestures and unmoving language. He is interested in gesture as language, on the anvil at the point of gathering meaning. The genre Subramanyan invokes were all non-individualistic artisan practices in which forms were standardized through repeated use of conventions. While invoking these antecedents, Subramanyan does not reiterate the standardized methods of representation. So it's about inventing new ways. He defreezes them, and while rendering each figure or object, the conventions are re-articulated rather than repeated. So that's the anti-style. Each work, each situation, each scenario, each context deserves and needs to reinvent and invent a whole new context of the gestural, which actually befits, and again, that's the reason why I love that word, analogous, which should be analogous of the experience itself. Through insidious details in subject matter, he opens conventional gestures to psychological inspection. That almost brings it to that. Some very interesting things that he talks about, and my observations about stylistic trappings. When you look at someone's work, you guess, you do. It's important. Your persona, your personality, everything is visible. But then when you become a victim to your own trappings. I remember I had asked him, why is it that, in history, actually during Renaissance, the same artists, the same works, and it is thereafter termed as mannerism? It's an interesting question, he said. I think I recall he said, when those artists didn't know what to do next and continued to re-involve themselves within what they were doing and repeated themselves, they virtually, the whole context became manneristic, something that got a clarity of his ability to string together the personal with the social, sensuous with the tragic, the celebratory with the lugubrious, the seriousness with irony, prosaic description with lyrical evocation, fact with metaphor, and reality with surreal, is the fruit of his foregoing individualistic style for language and his realization that an artist can grasp the world and give body to his subjectivity through his own language. I'm sure I'm supposed to keep some time for dialogue.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That is.
Am I doing?
That is after your 45 minutes.
After my 45 minutes.
Yes.
Am I doing well with time? Do I have some?
Yeah, you still have.
How much? I mean, I can continue.
Continue. 20 minutes. Now I think you should come to the painting.
Yeah. No, Ashokji.
You are still
No, I'm at it. I'm at it. You want me to describe the painting, which I'm not going to do.
Yeah, sure.
I think I am actually, what I'm trying to do is create the environment in which we should experience the painting.
But what is the experience?
Picasso described style as something which locks the painter into the same vision, the same technique, the same formula. So Subramanyan came to the same conclusion. A distinct style being flowed when I am concerned, which is that I feel and give voice to. Each medium I explore responds to a particular expressive need of mine, to a particular sensibility strand. Each leads me a certain area of the language. I do not want to be contained by any one of them. I do terracotta reliefs because they have a quality that becomes closer to human flesh. When handled in a certain way, it folds. Figures, wraps, tends like flesh does. I do weaving when I want to. What you may call solid graphics. Each medium has its specific potential. To him, recognizable identity for style becomes secondary to the process of integrating the language with the image. In a short catalog note he wrote in the year 1967, coming back from New York, I want my work to be ambiguous. A very important thing to remember. And I'd like it to appear to be every morning as a new configuration. I want to straddle the visible and the abstract, with their forms now becoming recognizable, now going into hiding. I think that this balancing of the abstract with the objective is one of the most significant characteristics of the traditional art of my country. Like in its temples, which are undoubtedly impressive as abstract heaps of stone, but also bristle with mythology and representational detail in second glance. This is where I get into contact with it. I want my work also to live in such a twilight zone of sensibility, although the ingredients I put into it are not what they used to be, but are for this time. Something more, coming to, I would like to, how he looks at life. He's going to turn 85. There's a celebration in March. That is an exhibition which is being planned in Calcutta. Some things that I have liked and what I have liked to share with you. Art these days is losing its status. Most of it is taken by fact, which is fabricated, constructed. The rest of it is with individual gimmickry. The artist today wants to be a performer. I purposely wanted to read it out. Like a tumbler, or a juggler, or a cartoonist, to amuse, to shock, to titillate. Not that I'd like to be amused. Not that I wouldn't like to be amused, shocked or titillated, but these are pleasures of the bathhouse. Art should give you something better. Well, that's what he feels. We're all free. The traditional is as inspiring as the modern, successfully achieved in fusion between the two. I think I'm coming to close to the painting. His achievement lies in being able to sieve out the essential from the imperative and still maintain a totality. In other words, he continued to talk. We couldn't understand initially that how this concept of totality should exist in a singular image. A story he told me and I continue to tell. He said, if a crow picks up a morsel of bread from outside, say IIC, decides to go and perch itself on the top of the IIC in the lounge, outside the lounge, wants and desires to have a drink with us in the lawn, and decides, no, I shouldn't do it, and go back and wait for us outside. He asked, can all these things coexist onto a single frame in a conventional Western attitude towards painting? And we're all, It could, he said, in a miniature painting. But I think that's exactly what he does. Making several diverse parts of the story linked to each other, experienced at different points of time, making a cohesive story in its totality, more experience in rhythm rather than narrative the way I described it in narration. It's a story which binds itself, you weave it the way you want to weave it. He himself says every morning when I would get up, I would like that painting to reflect and give me a new input. So on and so forth. I think that's I think we're getting closer to the painting. His achievement lies in not being able to sieve out the essential from the imperative and still maintain a totality. Facts of art in reality, self-revealed to privileged viewers, essentially or socially, through an odd bodily twitched or gesture, a chance configuration or animation, another concept is tremendously interesting. I think we'll observe that there is a great sense of movement, there's a great sense of vitality, there's a great sense of construction, yet with that sense of cohesiveness, both in color, in form, in the kind of movement, the rhythm of the line. I think I'll come closer once I'm through with this and share with you some of those things, which are actually not so close in the real work, because after all, in photography, however, this is a digital image, a lot of it still gets lost. Subramanyan draws upon psychology of perception and invokes the notion of schema. That's what I'm coming to. As a basic concept of linguistic structure, connecting visual image to visual experience, and suggests a critical dialogue, if not a lineage. One man pursues a larger truth, passion and reason, empathy and wit overlap in ways that are strange to those who do not step back to see the whole pattern. And I think that's the reason why I debated for 15 days to choose this painting. This concept of totality, to be able to, and Ashokji's desire and this forum's desire to see a particular work for over 45 minutes, to hear the verbose on one side and try to experience it in totality, is what I thought would be appropriate to talk and then make you relatable. When one pursues a larger truth, passion and reason, empathy and wit overlap in ways that are strange to those who do not step back to see the whole pattern and the whole juxtaposition of these, and then see themselves as a part of the whole. I mean, a very beautiful word in Hindi, tadatma, tadatma. And unless and until you become one, the image and the you, and relate to it in that fashion, everything else will actually remain only on the surface. And all that was essentially to get closer to the vitality that is embedded in it. Subramanyan's images are visions of this order that brings the antidotes together and show us that. I have a small short poem that I thought I will not delete from my. I quote, "Beyond the sky and the earth hover life and death, loathing and love, growth and great decay, Man snipes at clouds, birds land in spectral flight. Between abstract beauty and twisted agony, hearts meet under trees below the moon. All broken fragments of stories to be made, and all addressed both to our eyes and to our mind." Unquote. I actually went through a lot of his writing to cull out this piece, which I thought was so apt and befitted this entire painting. Not literally, but metaphorically, and binds all this together. Now, I go to the painting. I think all that background has been quite set to my mind, and would allow us to deal with the physicality of the image a little more, to be able to get a deeper insight into how all this coexists with a sense of totality and meaning. I think, can I move there? I'd like to be there. I again would not like to actually describe the work. That's no, Ashokji's insistence to get to the work, I thought I'd already gone to the work. Yeah. As I say, I mean, if you look at these surface textures, I've seen him experimenting with all kind of surface qualities. You know, blackboard back, the masonite sheet, surfaces on the ground with small pieces of glass, applying color in, by hand, by smudging with pieces of cloth, and then seeing how it gets transferred. And then also exploring all kinds of diverse possibilities as to how they could be made permanent. And you also realize that from the glass to the film that he paints today, he paints on Garware film. A lot of his work is on Garware film. It's a complete transition. I mean, as I said, I've seen him precisely in the year 1979, 1 feet glass, stacks and piles of them, picking them one by one, applying watercolor to several kind of surface textures, transferring them, keeping them to wet, seeing what kind of from lacquer, he's trying to use all that conventional material too. The whole idea was to make the surface vibrate. Besides the kind of cohesive vibration that he was interested in his form. Things that, if you look at, can we focus this a little more? I mean, I'm sorry. Okay, if you look at the quality of this line here, I've actually seen him using the brush. And when I initially saw him using the brush, I thought, my God, he uses the most horrible brushes. Almost, what should I say, the hair going back to the conventional way of using brush. During class, he would often ask for black ink, and this black ink has this quality of becoming hard, and making and he would pick up the brush and do cut, to kind of make the bristles very, very hard and strong. So the whole idea and the notion was to maintain that rhythm of the line art when it came from somewhere, but maintain a kind of a non-conventional attitude too. All these things are a result of that. Do you realize that what a great relationship these forms have to the toys that he does, the children's books that he does? It was a pleasure to produce the toys and also to produce the children's books. I remember Panchotan, the paper punch, cut, makes holes. He would sit for hours using that paper punch, kind of creating, animals in this, and all the waste screens that would be available in the graphic studio would be actually transported. Cut out of scissor, paste. Some of this, I can show you. I'm sure Anupam relates to what I'm trying to say. I can tell you exactly areas where the things of that kind. Yeah. You see that? These are like forms juxtaposed, played around with. It's like playing a game.
Right.
Large game with different forms placed here, placed there, juxtaposed ideas, this, that. That's how it all emanated. One theme actually getting integrated, juxtaposed into the other, literal. I'm not going to describe the literality of it. Something, an enactment, probably observed somewhere around his immediate environment. You see those flying images? A lot of these flying images appears in that. I always thought that they were like his extension of the flying Gandharvas. The flight of the flying Gandharvas that he would relate to. Yes. You see these lines? The way they break? The way even here, they break? And this is left white. Left exactly the way this transparent screen was, because when it was backed from the back and sealed. So it's like several layers. Actually, this is what people today do on computers. They have one screen, don't we?